Welcome back, everyone, to the Duo Dialogues on YouTube. It's great to have you all here with us.
Absolutely. And, if you've been following along with us on this journey, we always like to get into the nitty-gritty, really unpack things and go in depth.
For sure, for sure. Last time, we talked all about, the power of vocabulary, and we talked about, finding your voice, letting that natural voice really shine through.
It's so fundamental.
Yes, yes. And it really is, those are the building blocks for effective communication, right?
Right.
But today, we're going to kind of take those foundational ideas and apply them in a really practical area.
Okay.
Especially if you're aiming for, a really good score on the IELTS exam.
Yes.
And specifically, we're going to be looking at confidently answering personal questions in the IELTS Speaking Part 1.
Right.
Now, this might seem like the easiest part.
Yeah.
But really and truly, it's so important because this is where you make that first impression. This is where the examiner really gets, a sense of who you are and your ability to communicate.
It's like your opening statement.
Yes.
It really sets the tone for the rest of the exam. So even though it might seem simple, don't underestimate its importance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So for anyone who's tuning in who might not be totally familiar, the IELTS Speaking Part 1 is a relatively short conversation.
Yeah.
It only lasts like 4 to 5 minutes.
Okay.
And the examiner asks you questions about familiar everyday topics, things like your hobbies. Are you working? Are you a student?
Your family, your daily life, those kinds of things.
Family, your daily life. Exactly. Exactly. But the thing about it is it's not just about giving those short answers.
Right.
They really want you to, develop your responses, give more details,
It's about showing that you can communicate effectively, not just give one-word answers.
Exactly. Exactly. So let's just jump into like some of the typical areas that you might encounter.
Okay, sounds good.
So first up, we've got work and studies.
Right.
So you might get questions like, do you work or are you a student?
Yeah.
What do you like about your job or your studies? So like, what's a common pitfall that you see people falling into with, this kind of initial question?
You know what's interesting? A lot of people, they'll give like a really short answer and stop there. They'll be like, I'm a student.
Right, right.
But think about it. You've kind of, closed the door right there.
Right.
It's better to add a little bit more, like, I'm a student. I'm studying computer science because I've always loved technology.
Okay. Okay.
I work as a, a software developer.
Yeah.
I find it really challenging, but also really rewarding.
I see.
It's about, showing that you can elaborate.
Right. Right. And it's not just about, stating a fact.
Exactly.
It's about like using that as a springboard to, show off your language a little bit. Right. Okay. So moving on to the next area that's quite common, we've got hobbies and free time.
Okay.
So you might get questions like, what do you like to do in your free time?
Yeah.
Do you prefer indoor or outdoor activities? So with these kinds of questions, this feels like a really great opportunity to, bring a little bit of your personality into your responses.
Absolutely. Instead of just saying, I like sports.
Right.
Be specific. What sports?
Yeah.
Do you play them? Do you watch them? What do you like about them? Same thing with indoor, outdoor. Like, explain why you prefer one or the other.
Right. Okay.
Do you find indoor hobbies more relaxing? Do you like being outdoors because it gives you energy?
Right.
It's about the why.
So giving the examiner like a little window into, who you are and how you express yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, moving on. We've got family and friends.
Yeah.
So here you might get questions like, do you have a big family? How often do you meet your friends?
Yeah.
Now, these can feel like quite personal, but how should people kind of like approach these questions in the context of the IELTS?
Well, I think if you think about the purpose of the IELTS, it's to demonstrate your English.
Right.
So these questions are really about, like, how well can you describe relationships, routines.
Okay.
You don't have to give like deeply personal information.
Right.
But you can talk about the structure of your family.
Okay.
The kind of things you do together, how you stay in touch with your friends.
I see.
Sometimes a little brief anecdote can be nice here.
Okay. Okay. So keeping the focus on showcasing your language.
Exactly.
Not necessarily like, giving away all the intimate details of your life.
Right.
Okay. And then finally, we have daily routine.
Okay.
So this could be questions like, what's a typical day like for you? do you prefer mornings or evenings?
Yeah.
Now, these might seem like almost too simple.
Right.
Like not really worthy of a big discussion.
But it's an interesting point. How do you make something mundane sound interesting?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
instead of just like listing your activities like a timetable, try to add a little bit of color.
Okay.
Talk about why you structure your day the way you do, how you feel about different parts of your routine.
Mm-hmm.
If you prefer mornings, explain what you like about it. What do you typically do? It's about making the ordinary sound engaging.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. So we've covered some of the common areas, the question areas.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned earlier this really useful 3-step answering strategy.
Yes.
So I think it would be really good to break that down for everyone.
Yeah, for sure.
So what's like the first step in this approach?
Well, the first step is simple. Just give a direct answer to the question.
Right.
So if the examiner asks, do you enjoy cooking?
Uh-huh.
You can say, yes, I do enjoy cooking. Be clear and concise.
Get straight to the point. Okay, so after that direct answer, what comes next?
The next step is to add a reason or an explanation.
Okay.
So why do you enjoy cooking?
Right.
You could say, yes, I do enjoy cooking because I find it relaxing and I like to experiment with different flavors.
Okay. Okay.
So you're not just saying you like it, you're telling them why.
Right. So it's not just a preference. It's like, this is the reason why I have this preference.
Exactly.
Okay. And then what's the crucial third step?
The third step is to give an example or extend your answer a bit more.
Okay.
So you could say, for example, last weekend, I tried a new recipe for Italian pasta, and it turned out really well. My family loved it.
Okay.
So you're adding a specific instance. You're demonstrating your language in a more extended way.
I see. I see. So it's like directness.
Yes.
Followed by the explanation, and then like bringing it to life with an example.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I think it would be really helpful to see this in action.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's look at some examples of good and not so good answers. So let's take the question. Do you prefer reading books or watching movies?
Right.
What would be like a weak or insufficient way to answer that?
A weak answer would be just saying, I like movies.
Okay.
It's direct, but it doesn't give you any opportunity to show off your language skills.
It's like a missed opportunity.
Exactly.
Okay, so how can we transform that into a strong answer using this 3-step strategy?
You could say something like, I prefer watching movies because I find them more engaging.
Yeah.
For example, last weekend, I watched this really interesting science fiction movie that made me think about the future.
Wow. Okay.
So you have the preference, the reason, and a specific example.
Okay, that's a fantastic contrast. Let's try another common question. What do you usually do on weekends?
Okay.
What would be an example of a response that just doesn't quite, make the cut?
A less effective answer would be, I relax.
Okay.
Again, it's true, but it's very general. It doesn't give the examiner much to work with.
Right, right. So how can we elevate that using our 3-step approach?
You could say, on weekends, I usually like to relax and recharge after a busy week. I often spend time reading at home, or sometimes I'll meet up with friends for coffee. For instance, last Saturday, I went to a local bookstore, found a really interesting novel, and spent the afternoon reading it in a quiet cafe.
Okay, wow. So much better.
You have the answer, the activities, and a specific example with details.
Right, right. Those examples are so clear, like it really shows the difference that the 3-step strategy can make.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference.
Now, beyond just the structure of your answers, what are some key tips for sounding fluent and natural when you're speaking in part 1?
I think one of the most important things is to avoid memorized answers.
Okay.
Examiners can spot a memorized answer a mile away.
Right.
It's much better to listen to the question and respond genuinely.
So it needs to feel like a real conversation.
Exactly.
Not like you're just reciting something you've learned.
Right.
Okay. What other things can people do to sound more natural?
Use contractions.
Okay.
So instead of saying I am, say I'm. Instead of I will, say I'll.
Right, right.
It makes your speech flow more naturally.
It's a small thing, but it makes a big difference.
It really does.
Okay. What about speed?
Yeah.
Is it better to speak faster?
Not necessarily. Speaking too quickly can actually make it harder to understand you.
Right.
And it can make you sound nervous. It's better to speak at a moderate pace, clearly and naturally.
So clarity over speed.
Exactly.
Okay, and then one final thing, vocabulary.
Yeah.
Should people be trying to use really complex words all the time?
It's good to have a good vocabulary, but the key is to use it naturally.
Yeah.
Don't force in big words if they sound awkward or if you're not sure how to use them correctly.
Right.
It's better to use simpler language well than to make mistakes with complex words.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. So to just quickly recap, our key takeaways for tackling IELTS speaking part 1. Remember that 3-step strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Direct answer, reason or explanation, and example.
Exactly.
And then to sound more fluent and natural, avoid those memorized responses.
Right.
Use contractions, keep a clear and natural pace, and use a range of vocabulary, but keep it natural.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And by focusing on these things, you'll not only be able to answer the questions better, but you'll also show a higher level of English.
Exactly, which will hopefully lead to a better score overall.
Exactly.
All right, so that brings us to the end of this deep dive into IELTS speaking part 1.
Yeah.
We really hope that everyone found it helpful.
Absolutely. And for those of you who want to continue preparing for the IELTS, join us next time on the Duo Dialogues. We'll be talking about listening skills for IELTS and how to improve your score.
Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us for more IELTS preparation tips and language learning content. See you next time.